Order. No. Let's just move on to question 3. It's time to settle down. Question number 3, the Honourable David Cunliffe.
Has he seen the papers released by the Savings Working Group relating to GST, and if so, does he have any intention of raising GST further?
The Honourable Billings.
Mr. Speaker, yes, I have seen the papers, and no.
The Honourable David Cunliffe.
Mr. Speaker, how can New Zealanders trust his word when, before the Tax Working Group report, he has promised not to raise GST, only to change his mind as soon as he got the report?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the member is misrepresenting that, and as we've discussed it in this House many times, and if the member really believed the increase in GST was a bad idea, he'd be campaigning in Mana to cut GST and take back the income tax cuts. And neither the member nor his party have done that. Instead, they're hanging around.
Point of order is called. The Honourable Darren.
Mr. Speaker, the member opposite, the Minister, has got no responsibility for Labor Party policy. A large chunk of his answer cannot be to accuse a member of, first of all, misrepresenting something, and then secondly, go on to tell the member what their policy should be. Ministers are responsible in question time for the policies of the Executive of the day, not yesterday.
I think a point of order is being considered, and there won't be interjection on it. I have to confess, the Honourable Member, I was distracted at the time, did not hear the detail of the question asked. And if there's concern over it, what I'll do is let the member repeat his question. I'll listen to it very carefully. But if the question contains any political overtone to it, the member can expect the kind of answer he received. The Honourable David Cunliffe.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The question was, how can New Zealanders trust his word when, before the Tax Working Group report, he was promising not to raise GST, only to change his mind as soon as he got the report?
Order. The member concerns, I don't think the House needs further answer. I mean, I blame myself for allowing that situation to develop. The opposition shouldn't have been surprised when the question asks, how can the public trust someone's word if they get an answer that whacks the question around the ears a bit, because that is a highly political question. So I gave the member the chance to repeat his question, and having listened to it very carefully, I'm not surprised by the answer. Further supplementary question, Honourable David Cunliffe.
Mr. Speaker, is it the Minister's commitment to no further increases to GST, and is that commitment stronger than his promise in December 2008 not to raise GST, which was subsequently broken?
The Honourable Bill English.
Again, the member continues to misrepresent the issue around GST. And with respect to GST, the government is committed to not increasing it. And the member hasn't campaigned on it in Mana. Instead, their leader has been following the Prime Minister around to try and get in his photos.
The point of order, the Honourable David Cunliffe.
Mr. Speaker, this, as you will have noted, was the second reply in 2 supplementaries, in which the Minister began his answer by accusing the questioner of misrepresentation. And, Mr. Speaker, I would ask the Minister to clarify whether it was
No, member resume his seat. No. Member knows he can't do that. That if the member doesn't want the kind of answer he got, he must be mindful about taking supposed quotations out of context. Ministers are perfectly at liberty to challenge the way. If the member had stopped his question halfway through, it would have been a much more precise question. But then included in it an issue he knows, that I think he should know, having heard plenty of answers on the issue, the Minister would challenge the context of that part of the question. And the Minister did. And I can't, as Speaker, stop that. The solution lies in the member's own hands. Keep the question brief without the political content, and the member, I can assure him, will get answers. Aaron Gilmore, is it supplementary question?
Supplementary to the Minister. What other papers has he seen from the Savings Working Group?
The Honourable Bill English.
Mr. Speaker, the Savings Working Group is following the same practice as the Tax Working Group did, and that is in publishing its working papers as it goes. In fact, there hasn't been a more transparent policy-making process carried out by government. To date, they have received and published a range of submission submissions and published about a dozen background papers. I have to say I'm impressed with the depth and breadth to which they have covered the complex issue of how to increase New Zealand's savings and the considerable benefits that would arise from an increase in national savings.
The Honourable David Cunliffe.
Mr Speaker, rephrasing the previous supplementary, did the Minister or his government promise in December 2008 not to raise GST? And Mr Speaker, you'll observe I can't make it clearer than that.
The Honourable Bill English.
Mr Speaker, as has been discussed in this House before, when the Prime Minister was asked if he would raise GST in order to close the deficit, he answered no, and that is exactly what has happened. We've increased GST in the context of a tax package which has seen significant across-the-board income tax cuts, $25 for a family after the increase in GST, and $15 a week for individuals. And the member has had the opportunity to raise this issue in the Mana by-election and has signally failed.
Order. The question asked was a fair question and the Minister answered it very well. He didn't need that last bit. The Honourable David Cunliffe.
Mr Speaker, again, very straight and simple. Is there currently a fiscal deficit? If so, of what magnitude in the last financial year, and has it increased or decreased as a result of Budget 2010?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, the deficit in the last financial year would not have been impacted at all by Budget 2010.
Order.
Point of order, the Honourable David Cunliffe.
Mr Speaker, while admittedly there were several sub-questions, they were absolutely factual and straight. Now the Minister, sir,
Honourable David Cunliffe.
by your ruling, at best has the option to choose one of the two and answer it, but he actually answered none of them. And for the sake of completeness, sir, the first one was, was
order.
there a deficit in the
the
last
member is in his
financial
seat.
year?
I will invite the member to repeat his question because the question did not contain any political statement, and so I will invite him to repeat his question, but he won't make that kind of comment. The Honourable David Cunliffe.
Mr Speaker, was there a fiscal deficit in the last financial year, and of what magnitude? And would that deficit be increased or decreased as a result of Budget 2010?
The Honourable Bill English.
Mr Speaker, there was a fiscal deficit in the 2009-10 year. I can't give the member the exact figure, and it has increased in this budget because the government is committed to, because of falling revenue, while the government is maintaining and increasing expenditure on public services. And we have a plan to reduce that deficit from next year through to 2016.
The Honourable David Cunliffe.
Mr Speaker, having established that there was, although the Minister doesn't know the magnitude of it, a fiscal deficit in the last financial year, that he has just told the House, admitted to the House, that it is growing, can the Minister answer why the public should not therefore conclude that the government broke its promise not to raise GST when there is a deficit?
The Honourable Bill English.
Mr Speaker, well, it's a somewhat confusing question, but the answer, I think, is pretty straightforward. The answer is pretty straightforward. The government has put together a tax package designed to help rebalance this economy away from excessive consumption and housing speculation funded by debt. That tax package has included an increase in GST.
Point of order, the Honourable David Cunliffe.
Point of order, Mr Speaker, the question quite clearly did not ask the Minister to speculate on whatever...
Order. Member will resume his seat. I've listened to the Minister very carefully. I believe he's actually trying to give the House an answer. The member asked a serious question. I think his colleagues should show the courtesy of listening to the Minister's answer. And the Minister, I believe, was giving a pretty good answer. The Honourable Bill English.
Mr Speaker, the GST increase is part of a package of tax reform which is pushing New Zealanders actually in the direction they're already going, and that is to reduce excessive consumption and housing speculation funded by excessive debt. So we put up taxes on property and on consumption, and reducing the tax on savings, investments, work and on companies so that we can encourage investment, savings and new jobs and exports.
Mr Speaker.
Point of order, the Honourable David Cunliffe.
Mr Speaker, having listened carefully to the Minister